In the heart of a quiet African village, where the moonlight danced on the rooftops and the whispers of the ancestors lingered in the air, a cry pierced the night. A child was born, beautiful, yet different. Her tiny eyes, wide and unblinking, seemed to see far beyond the walls of the hut. Elders gathered around, their wrinkled faces shadowed with unease. "She's a blessing," some whispered. "She's a curse," others murmured. The child, Adora, grew up surrounded by mystery. Wherever she went, shadows followed. Wherever she spoke, truth unraveled. And wherever she looked, things unseen by others came to life. But when danger crept into her village, cloaked in royal robes and a charming smile, only Adora saw the truth. Only Adora could stop the darkness before it consumed everything she loved. This is the story of a girl who saw what others refused to believe, and the ghosts that stood by her side. In the heart of a bustling African village, where the sun painted the earth gold and the winds carried whispers of ancient tales, a child was born. Her name was Adora, meaning the daughter of all. She arrived at dawn, a time when the world seemed to hold its breath. But from the moment she drew her first cry, it was clear that Adora was no ordinary child. Her mother, Neka, felt it first. The labor had been smooth, almost too smooth, as if unseen hands guided the process. The midwives were astonished. Babies usually cried loudly, but Adora's cry was soft and haunting, like a flute in the distance. When she opened her eyes, they shimmered with an otherworldly light that seemed to pierce through anyone who looked at her. The villagers whispered, "She carries the mark of the spirits." As Adora grew, strange things began to happen. At 2 years old, she would sit alone, her tiny hands clapping as if playing with an invisible friend. "Who are you clapping for?" her father, Ease, asked one day, his voice tinged with unease. Adora pointed to an empty corner and said, "It's Nkem. He says he's my friend." Ease's face paled. "What friend? There's no one there." Adora tilted her head and smiled. "You can't see him. But he sees you. He says you should stop hiding coins under the mattress." Ease's heart raced. How could she know about the coins he hid? Nkem, the invisible friend, was no ordinary companion. He was a ghost, a small, translucent figure that only Adora could see. He had wide, kind eyes and a voice as gentle as a lullaby. He told Adora stories about the past, warned her of dangers, and sometimes predicted small events, like when it would rain or when her mother would bake bread. Nkem wasn't frightening, he was playful and curious. But his presence unsettled Adora's parents. "This is not normal," Neka whispered to Ease one night. "We need to do something before people start talking." But Adora didn't care about normal. To her, Nkem was a loyal friend who never lied, never hurt her, and always made her laugh. One day, Adora's younger sister, Ifeoma, was born. Ifeoma was a bubbly, cheerful baby, and Adora loved her dearly. But Nkem warned her. "She's special too," he said, his voice soft. "And because of that, danger will come for her. You must protect her." Adora didn't understand what he meant, but she nodded. From that day on, she became fiercely protective of Ifeoma, shadowing her wherever she went. The villagers began to notice Adora's odd behavior. She often spoke to herself or stared into space as if listening to something only she could hear. "That child is touched by the spirits," an old woman muttered during market day. "Nothing good can come from such a gift." Ease and Neka tried to shield Adora from the gossip, but they couldn't deny their own fear. "What if the spirits are using her?" Neka asked one evening. "What if they take her away from us?" "We'll find help," Ease replied. "A priest, a healer, anyone who can rid her of this," this thing. Despite gefus, Adora thrived. She excelled in school, often answering questions that left even the teachers stunned. But her classmates were wary of her. Once, during a spelling test, Adora whispered, "Nkem, what's the answer to number 3?" And just like that, she wrote down the correct word. Her teacher, Mrs. Obiner, noticed. "Adora, who are you talking to?" she asked sharply. "My friend, Nkem," Adora replied innocently. The class burst into laughter, but Mrs. Obiner's face darkened. "Stop this nonsense, Adora. There's no such thing as ghosts." Adora's heart sank. Why didn't anyone believe her? One evening, as the family gathered around the fire, Nkem appeared beside Adora. "Something is coming," he whispered. "What is it?" Adora asked aloud. Her parents exchanged worried glances. "Who are you talking to now?" Ease demanded. "Nkem says something bad is coming. We have to be careful," Adora replied. "Enough," Ease shouted. "This has to stop, Adora. You're scaring your sister." Tears welled up in Adora's eyes. Why couldn't they see that Nkem was trying to help? That night, she prayed. "Please, let them believe me one day," she whispered. But the shadows in the room seemed to whisper back, and Adora knew that her journey was only beginning. Adora's life grew more complicated as her gift became harder to hide. She was now 8 years old, and Nkem, her ghost friend, was always by her side. Unlike other children, Adora didn't feel lonely, but the world around her began to treat her differently. Her parents' fears deepened, her classmates kept their distance, and whispers of her strange abilities spread across the village like wildfire. Nkem wasn't the only ghost Adora saw. As she grew older, she began to notice more spirits around her. Some were kind and gentle, like Nkem, but others were dark and ominous, their presence heavy like a storm cloud. They never spoke to her, only watched from the shadows. "Adora, why are you staring at the corner?" Neka asked one afternoon while cooking. "There's a man there," Adora replied, pointing. "He looks sad." Neka dropped the spoon she was holding, her face pale. "Stop it, Adora. There's no one there." "But, no more of this nonsense," Neka snapped, her voice trembling. Adora learned to keep quiet after that, but the ghosts didn't go away. They followed her to school, sat beside her during meals, and even hovered near her bed at night. Despite the food her gift brought, it had its advantages. During a big math exam at school, Adora struggled with a question. She whispered, "Nkem, what's the answer to number 6? Nkem floated beside her, his translucent finger pointing to the correct answer on her sheet. She quickly lowered it down and moved on to the next question. When the results came back, Adora scored the highest in the class. Her teacher, Mrs. Obiner, looked at her with suspicion. "Adora, how did you manage to get every question right?" "I studied," Adora said quietly, avoiding her teacher's piercing gaze. Her classmates whispered among themselves. "She's weird," one of them said. "Maybe she's a witch." Adora pretended not to hear, but the words stung. One evening, as the family sat under the moonlight, Nkem spoke urgently. "Adora, listen to me. There's danger coming to your family. It will begin with a stranger." "What kind of danger?" Adora whispered back. "A powerful man will come into your lives, and he will bring darkness. You must be ready." Adora's heart pounded. "What can I do?" "You'll know when the time comes," Nkem said, his voice fading. Adora didn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling, Nkem's words echoing in her mind. A stranger bringing darkness? What could it mean? By now, Ease and Necker were desperate. They had tried everything to fix Adora, prayers, rituals, even a visit to a distant herbalist. But nothing worked. "We can't keep living like this," Necker said one evening. "The villagers are starting to avoid us. They think Adora is cursed." "She's our daughter," Ease replied, though his voice wavered. "We can't abandon her." "But what if this thing inside her brings harm to Ifeoma?" Ease didn't answer. One day, Ease took Adora to a renowned healer in the next village. The healer was an old man with white hair and piercing eyes. He studied Adora for a long time before speaking. "This child is not cursed," the healer said. "She is blessed, though her gift is heavy to bear." "Blessed?" Ease echoed. "How can seeing ghosts be a blessing?" "The spirits she sees are not ordinary," the healer explained. "They are messengers, sent to guide and protect her. But with such a gift comes great danger. You must protect her, for she will be the key to something much greater than you can imagine." Ease returned home deep in thought. Could Adora truly be special? Meanwhile, Adora began to sense a change in the air. The ghosts around her grew restless, the whispers more urgent. Even Kem seemed more serious than usual. "Adora, remember what I told you," he said one night. "Danger is close. You must be strong." "But how can I fight something I can't see?" Adora asked. "You'll see it when the time is right," Kem replied. It happened on a sunny afternoon. A man arrived in the village, riding a horse as black as night. He was tall and handsome, with a smile that dazzled everyone he met. His name was Prince Obinna, the heir to the kingdom. The village buzzed with excitement. It wasn't every day that royalty visited the humble home. The prince charmed everyone, from the elders to the children. But when Adora saw him, her stomach twisted in fear. "Nkem," she whispered, "is this the danger you spoke of?" Nkem's expression darkened. "Yes. Be careful, Adora. He is not what he seems." The prince stayed in the village longer than expected, claiming he loved the simplicity of life there. But Adora knew better. She could feel the darkness around him, a shadow that no one else seemed to notice. And then, one evening, the prince did something that sent chills down Adora's spine. He proposed marriage to her younger sister, Ifeoma. The news spread through the village like wildfire. Prince Obinna wanted to marry Ifeoma. Everyone was ecstatic, celebrating the idea of their beloved princess marrying into royalty. Women sang songs of joy, and men toasted to the family's good fortune. But Adora's heart was heavy. She knew something was wrong, but no one believed her. In the days following the proposal, the village seemed brighter. Ifeoma, radiant and full of excitement, danced around the house. "I can't believe it, Adora," she exclaimed. "The prince wants to marry me." Adora tried to smile, but her face betrayed her worry. "Ifeoma, what do you know about him?" "What do I need to know? He's kind, handsome, and rich. What more could anyone want?" Adora glanced at Nkem, who floated silently by her side. "What do we do?" she whispered when Ifeoma was out of earshot. "You must stop the wedding," Nkem said. "The prince's intentions are not pure. He has come to destroy your sister, and you." Adora's chest tightened. "Why me? You are the key, Adora. Your gift threatens him. He knows this, even if he doesn't fully understand it yet. If he takes Ifeoma, he will use her to weaken you." Adora decided to confront her parents. That evening, as they sat around the fire, she said, "I don't think Ifeoma should marry Prince Obinna. Her father friend." "Adora, what are you saying? This is a blessing from the gods." "No, it's not," Adora insisted. "There's something dark about him. I can feel it." "Feel it?" her mother snapped. "You and your strange feelings. Must you always bring trouble?" "It's not trouble," Adora pleaded. "I'm trying to protect Ifeoma." "You're jealous." Ifeoma's voice cut through the air like a knife. She had been listening from the shadows. You can't stand that someone wants me and not you. Adora's heart broke. That's not true, she whispered. Yes, it is. You're always acting like you're better than everyone because you're different. Well, not everything is about you, Adora. Tears stung Adora's eyes as she ran to her room. Nkem followed her, his expression full of sorrow. They won't listen, Adora said, her voice trembling. How can I save her if no one believes me? We'll find a way, Nkem said gently. But you must not give up. As the wedding preparations continued, Adora began noticing strange things about the prince. He would often disappear into the forest at odd hours, returning with a strange, shadowy aura. Animals avoided him, even the usually bold goats that roamed freely in the village. One evening, Adora followed him into the forest, careful to stay hidden. She watched as he stood before a large tree, muttering words she couldn't understand. Suddenly, the air grew cold, and a dark figure emerged from the shadows. Adora's breath caught in her throat. The figure spoke in a deep, guttural voice. Have you secured the girl? Not yet, the prince replied. But soon. Her family is blinded by greed and excitement. The girl will be mine, and through her, I will destroy the one who sees. Adora's blood ran cold. He was talking about Ifeoma, and her. The next day, Adora tried again to warn her family. The prince is dangerous, she cried. I saw him in the forest, talking to something dark. Her father slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Adora. You will not ruin this family's chance at greatness with your wild stories. But it's true, Adora insisted. You're just jealous, Ifeoma said coldly. You can't stand that I'm happy. Adora turned to Nkem, who stood silently beside her. What do I do now? She whispered. Sometimes, the truth only reveals itself when it's too late, Nkem said. But we can still prepare. As the wedding day approached, the village buzzed with excitement. Colorful fabrics were hung on hearses, and the aroma of cooking filled the air. The women wove garlands of flowers, and the men built a grand canopy for the ceremony. Adora, however, could feel the tension in the air. Nkem stayed close, his presence a constant reminder of the danger. On the eve of the wedding, Nkem gave Adora one final piece of advice. During the ceremony, stay close to your sister. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. What time? What will happen? Adora asked, her voice trembling. I cannot say, Nkem replied. But trust your gift. It will guide you. That night, Adora couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Outside, she could hear the faint sound of drumming as the villagers continued their celebrations. Suddenly, she felt a cold breeze sweep through her room. Nkem appeared, his face grave. Adora, the prince knows you've been watching him. He will try to stop you tomorrow. Be ready. Adora nodded, fear coiling in her stomach. I will. As the first rays of dawn broke over the village, Adora prepared herself for the battle she knew was coming. The wedding would either be the end, or a new beginning. The wedding day arrived with all the fanfare and color the village could muster. Women in vibrant Ankara outfits danced and sang, their voices blending into a chorus of celebration. Men shared palm wine under the shade of a giant baobab tree, praising the fortune of Ifeoma's family. You look beautiful, Ifeoma, Adora said softly, though her voice trembled. Thank you, Ifeoma replied, her tone distant. She still hadn't forgiven Adora for her warnings about the prince. Adora turned to Nkem, who hovered silently by her side. Are we ready? She whispered. Nkem's eyes glowed faintly. Stay close to her. When the moment comes, you'll know. The village square was transformed into a grand stage. A canopy of woven palm leaves stretched overhead, adorned with flowers and colorful cloth. Drummers beat their instruments in rhythmic unison, and dancers twirled gracefully, their movements hypnotic. Prince Obinna stood at the altar, dressed in regal attire. His smile dazzled the crowd, but Adora saw through it. Beneath his charm was a dark, simmering malice. Ifeoma walked down the aisle, escorted by their father. The villagers gasped at her beauty, murmuring blessings and praises. Adora followed closely, her eyes scanning the crowd and the shadows around them. As Ifeoma reached the altar, the prince took her hand. "You are the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," he said, his voice dripping with charm. Ifeoma blushed, but Adora felt a chill in the air. As the priest began the ceremony, Adora noticed movement at the edges of the square. Shadows flickered where there should have been none, and faint whispers drifted on the breeze. "Nkem," Adora whispered. "They're who, aren't they?" "Yes," Nkem replied. "The others have come to help, but they can't intervene unless you act first." "What should I do?" "Wait for the prince's true form to reveal itself. Then, call them." The ceremony continued, the priest reciting the traditional verse. When it was time for Ifeoma to speak, she looked into the prince's eyes and said, "I do." Adeora's heart sank. Then it was the prince's turn. He smiled at the crowd, his voice steady as he said, "Shh." Before he could finish, the sky darkened. Clouds rolled in, casting the village in shadow. The drummers faltered, their rhythm breaking. The crowd murmured in confusion. Adora felt a surge of energy. "Nah," Nkem said. She stepped forward. "Stop." The crowd turned to her in shock. "Adora, what are you doing?" her father shouted. "He's not who he says he is," Adora cried, pointing at the prince. "He's here to harm Ifeoma and destroy this family." The prince's smile faltered, and for a moment, his eyes gleamed with an unnatural light. "What nonsense is this?" he said, his voice cold. "She's telling the truth," Adora continued. "He's been using dark magic to deceive us." The villagers gasped, some stepping back in fear. "Enough of this," the prince shouted, his voice booming unnaturally. The shadows around him began to twist and grow, forming a dark, ghostly aura. His true form emerged, a figure shrouded in darkness, his eyes burning with malevolence. The crowd screamed and scattered as the prince's transformation completed. Ifeoma collapsed to the ground, her face pale with terror. Adora stood her ground, her heart pounding. "Nkem, what do I do?" "Call them," Nkem said urgently. Adora closed her eyes and whispered, "Help me." Suddenly, they were filled with a brilliant light. The ghosts Adora had seen all her life appeared, but they were no longer just ghosts. They were angels, their forms radiant and majestic. The prince snarled, his shadowy form writhing as the angels surrounded him. "You cannot stop me," he roared. Adora stepped forward, her voice steady. "You will not harm my sister, or anyone else. Your time here is over." The angels raised their hands, their light growing brighter. The prince screamed as the light engulfed him, his dark form dissolving into nothingness. When the light faded, the crowd slowly returned, their faces filled with awe and fear. The prince was gone, leaving behind only his royal robes. Ifeoma, trembling, looked at Adora. You saved me," she whispered. The priest stepped forward, his face pale. "What happened here?" Adora took a deep breath. The prince was not who he claimed to be. He came to harm us, but the angels stopped him. One of the elders, a wise old man, stepped forward. "The girl speaks the truth. Her gift is real. We were blind to it, but now we see." The villagers apologized to Adora and her family, vowing to protect and honor her gift. Ifeoma hugged her sister tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she said. "You saved my life." Nkem appeared beside Adora, his face glowing with pride. "You did well," he said. "What happens now?" Adora asked. "Now, your journey continues. Your gift is a blessing, and there is more work to be done. But for today, rest. You've earned it." Adora smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. The shadows were gone, and the village was safe once more. The village had never witnessed anything like the events of the wedding day. For days, the people whispered about Adora and the light that had banished the prince. Some still feared her, others revered her, but all now understood that her gift was real. Adora, however, felt far from extraordinary. She was exhausted, her mind replaying the confrontation with the prince over and over. What if she hadn't been strong enough? What if Nkem hadn't guided her? "Stop dating yourself," Nkem said, appearing by her side as she sat under the old baobab tree. "I'm not dating," Adora muttered, "go she was." "You were chosen for this, Adora," Nkem said gently. "And you proved today why. The village is safe because of you." Adora nodded slowly. "What happens now?" "For now, you rest. But your journey is far from over. Darkness will always try to find its way into the world. You must always be ready." Life in the village slowly returned to normal, but there was a shift in how people treated Adora. Elders sought her advice, neighbors came to her for guidance, and even her once dismissive classmates now watched her with awe and respect. Ifeoma, who had been at the heart of the danger, became Adeora's greatest defender. "My sister saved my life," she told anyone who would listen. "She's not cursed, she's a blessing." The bond between the sisters deepened, and they spent hours talking about everything they had been through. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you," Ifeoma said one evening. "I was so blinded by the prince's charm. I should have trusted you." "You didn't know," Adora replied softly. "But I'll always protect you, no matter what." One quiet night, Adora had a vivid dream. She stood in a field of golden light, surrounded by the angels she had seen during the wedding. Nkem stepped forward, his face brighter than ever. "Adora, there is something you must know," he said. "What is it?" "Your gift is part of a much bigger plan. There are others like you in the world, children with unique abilities. Together, you will bring balance to places where darkness has taken hold." "How will I find them?" "They will find you," Nkem said, his voice fading as the dream dissolved into light. Adora woke with a start, her heart pounding. Was it just a dream, or was it a message? 1 week after the wedding, a stranger arrived in the village. He was an old man with a staff and eyes that seemed to see into one's soul. He knocked on Adeora's door late in the evening, and her father answered with a frown. "Who are you, and why have you come at this hour?" Unease asked. "I have come to see the girl who saved the village," the man replied. Unease hesitated, then called for Adora. When Adora appeared, the old man smiled. "You are the one I've been searching for." "Me?" Adora asked, confused. "Yes. Word of your gift has traveled far, and I have come to help you understand it. You are not alone, child. There are others like you, and it is time for you to learn the full extent of your power." Adeora's parents exchanged worried glances. "She is just a child," Necker said. "She has been through enough already." "She is no ordinary child," the old man said gently. "And her journey is only beginning." That night, Adora lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The old man's words echoed in her mind. Could there really be others like her? Was she meant for something greater? "I'm scared, Nkem," she whispered. "Being scared is normal," Nkem replied. But remember, you're never alone. I will always be with you. What if I fail? You won't, Nkem said firmly. You've already proven how strong you are. The next morning, Adora made her decision. She would go with the old man and learn more about her gift. She hugged her parents tightly, promising to return. Be careful, my child, Unease said, his voice thick with emotion. Stay safe, Necker added, tears in her eyes. Ifeoma clung to her sister. Come back soon, she whispered. I will, Adora said, her heart heavy but determined. As Adora and the old man left the village, she felt a mix of fear and excitement. The path ahead was unknown, but she was ready to face it. Nkem floated beside her, his presence a comforting reminder that she was never truly alone. You're destined for great kings, Adora, he said. She smiled, the weight on her shoulders feeling a little lighter. Let's go. And so, Adeora's journey continued, a journey of light, courage, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest times, hope could prevail. The end. Thank you for watching. Where are you watching from? Kindly reply us in the comments section and please subscribe and turn on the notification bell to be notified anytime we post other interesting stories. We love you.